Pittsburgh Penguins are officially sellers, but how did they get here? Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins joins us to discuss that and the return they got for Jake Guentzel next on Locked On's 2024 NHL Trade Deadline Special.
The Locked On Podcast Network presents the NHL Trade Deadline.
Gil Martin of Locked On NHL here. The Pittsburgh Penguins have traded two-time 40-goal scorer Jake Guentzel along with defenseman Ty Smith to their Metro Division rival, the Carolina Hurricanes, for Michael Bunting, first and fifth round picks with some conditions, and three prospects. Hunter Hodies of Locked On Penguins joins me now to break down the deal from a Penguins team that has had a disappointing season so far. Hunter, your initial reaction to this blockbuster trade?
My initial reaction when it first came through last night, I was definitely pretty upset. I was able to sleep on it a little bit. I'm not as upset right now, but I'm still underwhelmed by the return. And I understand that Jake Guentzel is a rental, so I kind of resigned myself to the fact that they weren't going to be getting a massive haul for him. But the Hurricanes were still a team that I circled. And I was on the Locked On Penguins podcast with Pat this week saying, okay, if you can get one of Carolina's blue chip prospects and potentially a first round pick, or even just one of those two, I think you can at least look okay coming out of this deal. You know, one of Scott Morrow, one of Jackson Blake, one of Bradley Nadeau, but they weren't able to do that. And instead they got three prospects who I think are fine players, but I don't think they're really going to move the needle much when it comes to the next year or two of the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's what it comes down to. I think of the three, Vasily Ponomarev is the closest to making an NHL impact. He actually made his NHL debut this year, 2 points in 2 games with the Hurricanes with their AHL affiliate, the Chicago Wolves, 39 games, 8 goals, 29 points. He's kind of projected to be a bottom 6 player, but so are the other 2 prospects in the trade. Kyle Dubas decided to go quantity over quality, but in my opinion, I would have done the opposite. I would have done quality over quantity and tried to at least get one blue chip or even a first round pick, but they didn't even get either in this deal. That's why I'm just a little bit upset. You're probably not going to get that first round pick because you only get it if the Hurricanes win the Stanley Cup. And right now, I don't have the Hurricanes winning the Stanley Cup, and you didn't get a true blue chip prospect as well. I'm not trying to sound like a dedicated hater over here. I'm just a bit underwhelmed by the return. I feel like they still could have done a little bit better for the best player on the market, even though he's a rental. And say he does re-sign with the Hurricanes, even though that doesn't look likely right now, but say that happens, I think this deal looks even worse if it does.
Overall, how surprised are you the Penguins are where they are right now?
I'm stunned. I did not see this heading into the season. I fully bought into this team as a playoff team. I thought they made quite a few moves that were going to get them back to the playoffs. I loved the Erik Karlsson trade. I loved the Alex Nedeljkovic signing. I warmed up to the Lars Eller signing, even though I didn't like it at first. I was a bit questionable regarding some of the depth pieces, but I still thought, hey, it's going to be better than last year's bottom 6. Well, I was dead wrong about the bottom 6. And while I have loved the Erik Karlsson acquisition, he hasn't been that good on the power play, but I still think he's been great overall at 5-on-5. But this has just been a disaster of a season for this team. I did not, in my wildest dreams, envision that this team would be further out of a playoff spot this year compared to last year where they missed the playoffs by a point. I thought for sure Guentzel was going to finish the season as a Penguin when coming into the season. I actually thought he was going to extend with the Penguins heading into this season. I honestly had people bring up Jake being traded as kind of a joke heading into the season. I just didn't think much of it. I am really surprised at where they're at this season because I fully thought this was going to be a team that at least got a wild card spot, if not potentially fighting for a top 3 spot in the Metro.
Sidney Crosby's reaction to the trade, not exactly positive. Talk to me about that, and what does that mean for the Penguins?
You could tell he was pretty gutted by it. I mean, this is the best winger he's ever had, in my opinion. And honestly, throughout the 2 games this week, Gil, you could tell something was up with him on the ice. You could tell that he knew this was coming. His play reflected it a little bit. And Sid has been great for this team all season. I'm not trying to say that he's been bad or anything like that, but this week you could tell that something in his play dipped a little bit. Like he knew that this trade was going to go down. And Is he disappointed deep down? Absolutely. I mean, he wants to get back to the Stanley Cup playoffs. But as for what this team means for his long-term future or anything like that, I don't think it really means anything. I know you've seen the rumors about, oh, could the Colorado Avalanche get Sidney Crosby or could he go to another team? That is not going to happen, my friends. He is going to re-sign with the Pittsburgh Penguins probably over the summer and will end his career with the Penguins along with Evgeny Malkin and along with Chris Letang. That's just a foregone conclusion at this point. But I really do hope that this is not the quote unquote end for this score and that they continue to try and build around him this upcoming summer and try to give it another go for this upcoming season. We didn't really talk about Michael Bunting that much in your first question, Gil. I like him as a player. I just think he's a little bit overpaid. He's also been really struggling with Carolina this year. I think obviously he had the 2 20-goal seasons with the Maple Leafs, but I think a lot of that had to do with him playing with Austin Matthews most nights. Now, can he repeat that with Sidney Crosby? That remains to be seen. I'm just not really big on his contract overall. Just think he hasn't been good this year. I think he does bring an element that the Penguins lack, which is a strong net front presence. Kind of reminds me just a little tiny bit of maybe a Chris Kunitz or Patrick Hornquist, but I don't think he's ever going to reach that level. Don't get me wrong here, people. But I do think he brings an element that they need a little bit, but I'm just not a big fan of the contract and just the way he's played this year. I don't think that can be the centerpiece of a Jake Guentzel trade.
And where does he fit into the lineup, do you think?
I think he'll play in the top 6. I would not be surprised if they actually try him out on Sidney Crosby's wing next to Brian Rust when he comes back, or next to Rickard Rakell, whatever Mike Sullivan decides to do for the rest of the season. But I do think he's going to start in the top 6, probably with Sidney Crosby.
Is Kyle Dubas done, or is there another move coming before the trade deadline this afternoon?
I don't think he's done, nor should he be done. I think he should be looking to sell off someone like Riley Smith, even though he's struggled a lot throughout this season. I do think with how he's played in the playoffs over the years, teams will look at that and be like, okay, we could use that in the playoffs, and the price will probably not be that expensive. The Penguins will probably get a mid-round pick or something like that back for Smith. Maybe he goes back to Vegas. Skill, they're always in on every player at this time at the trade deadline. So I could see him being moved. I could see Lars Eller being moved, even though he only has a year left on his contract. I could see the Penguins getting back a pick or a prospect for him. He's been one of their best depth pieces this year. Could see him going out. I also could see Alex Nedeljkovic, the goaltender, being moved out as well. I think he's had a really strong bounce back season, and there's plenty of teams that need goaltending this time of year, especially the New Jersey Devils, if they want to make a push for the playoffs. And by all indications, they still want to. They just fired Lindy Ruff earlier this week. So I think they remain an option for Nedeljkovic, as do quite a few other teams as well. Don't be surprised also if Chad Riedel gets moved. I think he's a strong number 6, number 7 type defenseman for contending teams this time of year. And then outside options, someone like a Rickard Rakell, but that's probably not going to happen. It's just an option that I had to put out there for everyone.
All right, fair enough. For more on this trade and all the Penguins deadline dealing, be sure to tune in to Locked On Penguins for free on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.